Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Dr. Prasad Raj Dandekar. I'm a radiation oncologist in Mumbai. Today, we are celebrating Ganesh Festival, and in the middle of this COVID crisis, I hope the festival brings us some amount of wisdom, happiness, and also courage to fight what we are going through. You may be aware that we did a similar webinar last week on sensitizing healthcare professionals for the healthcare needs of the LGBT community. That was part one. We had excellent speakers such as Dr. Dinesh Bhugra, Dr. Avinash D'Souza, and Dr. Amrit Patazoshi. This is a part two of the webinar series where we have again an excellent panel of speakers, Dr. Ajit Bhide, Dr. Suresh Baramat, and Dr. Kersi Chawda. But before we delve into the webinar, I just want to spend a couple of minutes on discussing why are we doing this webinar. And I'm thankful to Practo for taking the initiative and building this webinar series. The reason why we are doing this is a clear understanding that we have as healthcare professionals that around maybe 8 to 10% of the population belongs to the LGBTQ community. Now, while we were being trained as physicians, we did not get any training into healthcare needs of the LGBTQ community. And that has sort of disempowered us from helping and supporting this community better. The idea of this webinar series is to empower us to help this marginalized community do better health-wise and help them. And in return, what we will get is a good client engagement, a good patient engagement, where we will build long-lasting relationships with our patients. So it's a win-win situation. The patients also benefit and we also benefit. And this is not just for patients. I mean, you will be in your social life also be surrounded by people who belong to LGBTQ community. And it will empower you to understand where they are coming from as well. So let's kickstart the second part. And to start with, I want to invite Dr. Amrit Patazoshi, who's a very well-known psychiatrist from Orissa. He is a professor there. And I want to invite him to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Ajit Bhide.
Thank you, Prashad. Thank you so much. Congratulations. And you have done a lot for everybody, including mental health professionals, where you have guided us, you have helped us reach where we are trying to reach now. Thank you so much. Coming to Dr. Ajit Bhide, he is my mentor. He is one of my guides, who's always helped me whenever I needed something. The wonderful gentleman, past president of the Indian Psychiatry Society, which we are an organization of maybe 10,000 psychiatrists. He has been the president 1 year back. Faculty, ex-faculty from NIMHANS and St. John's. Brilliant credentials. Currently, he chairs the IPS task force on LGBT. He is currently the head of department in St. Martha's Hospital and teaching faculty at Spandana Hospital. He has been the man instrumental in, taking away Article 377. As president, he has given us the force, the direction, and he's given us the courage to think what we are thinking now. Hats off to sir. He's the Colgate man. If you go to TV and put on your TV, if you look the Colgate advertisement, it is Dr. Ajit Bhide who you will see. Lucky and fortunate to have you with us, sir. Thank you so much for coming. So over to you, sir. So you are in mute.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Amrit. And thank you, Prasad, for organizing these webinars on LGBT and sensitizing the medical community to this crying need, because we see sometimes, I have to say this, primitive attitudes to this whole section of our population who are deprived of the right measures to understand this segment of our very people and treat them with due respect, understanding what goes on in their minds and in their lives. Now, I was saying that this is going to be a little like the Aratis. We sing praises of each other. Amrit gave me the credit. One of the first things I did when I became president was I knew that this was a crying need, and I needed a team that will bring in sensible approaches to LGBT, which really, Suresh has dimmed this into me, which is really not autonomy. In the sense, we are now considering this as not as mental illness at all, to belong to any of these alternative sexualities. And nevertheless, we needed to have teeth, and I knew the person who would do the job for the Indian Psychiatry Society. I invited Kersey to be chair of this task force on LGBT. He, with the co-chair Amrit and Avinash D'Souza as the convener, held seminars throughout the country to make people aware of what LGBT was all about, the mental health aspects of LGBT. And we came up then with a policy statement, a statement from the society saying that this is not pathology. Please don't criminalize these people. The existing law treated them like criminals. And please absorb them into the society as respectable members of the society. Kersey's dynamic leadership helped us frame this kind of statement. The statement came on behalf of the society, and we were very, very happy. Kersey particularly pointed this out, that the Supreme Court, 4 of the 5 judges who gave the judgment in this case, which decriminalized homosexuality, quoted the IPS statement, which was the first professional official statement at a high level. I must say that the IPS has been working on this for about 7 years prior to our statement, but it wasn't taken notice of, and there was no official statement as such put out. And I think that helped. Now, today we are in a stage, having covered a major part of the clinical aspects of LGBT, we are now looking at certain aspects. And today, I shall be focusing, though it was called a keynote address, it isn't quite a keynote address, it's something to do with the phenomenon of coming out. Now, when somebody is homosexual, and we tend to have a heteronormative way of thinking, that's very common. I won't say it's necessarily correct, but it's understandable. We have this notion that people who have a different sexual orientation, they have to come out with it. Now, if somebody doesn't come out on their own, then in a fashion that can be quite traumatic for the individual, this person is outed. That means his alternative sexuality is brought out into the open by somebody else. It's a very, very traumatic thing for many people. And I've seen the aftermath of outing that has affected people who have this kind of orientation. On the other hand, we encourage people who have an alternative sexuality, and we have a number of gay activists even in the medical community who come out and say that we are otherwise oriented. I'm gay, or I'm lesbian, or I'm bisexual or trans, and this is to be encouraged. And the phenomenon of coming out is laced in its own way with a number of trials, tribulations, about which I shall be talking. Sorry, I'm a little non-savvy where technology is concerned. Are my slides visible now?
So you're able to see your Zoom screen. So you may have to open your PowerPoint presentation so we can see that.
I don't know how to go about this. I'm sorry. Just give me a little while.
Yeah, sure, sir.
I don't know how to maximize the screen.
So, Dr. Bide, I have got your slides. If
no,
you,
but I think there's a little change I've made because of spelling mistakes and so forth. So,
okay. If you maybe minimize the
Okay now?
yes, you just have to maximize it and we can
Yeah.
see it.
All right.
Yeah, yeah, perfect.
All right. So coming out is a matter of turmoil, of trials and tribulations. And we'll be dwelling on different aspects of coming out. Now, the LGBT community as a whole has been censored, has been subjected to different types of persecution. And we live in a liberated world where all this is changing slowly. I've taken the next couple of slides, which are from a confessional by a Indian gay student and activist. And he says, coming out is not a one-time thing. It's a recurring process that you have to go through. First of all, with yourself, then with your friends, with your family, and quite often even with strangers. Now, when a young person is growing up, it's not rare for such a boy who is queer, especially when you don't understand fully or at all why you are being bullied. But that's something which very many gay people have to face early in their life. The questions that baffle these people's mind: what's so different about me? Am I doing something wrong? And there's an unnecessary feeling of either inferiority or guilt or both. Why can't I just have it easy like other boys? These questions stab at you because you just don't understand what's, within inverted commas, mind you, wrong initially. Actually, there's nothing wrong. It's just that it's unusual. Coming out for me has been an intensive three-stage process. First, you don't want to believe there's something different about you, so there's denial. Then you want to pretend that everything is all right and you're not a different sort of person, so there's repression. And hopefully, if there's a healthy basic psychology, then eventually there is an acceptance. Now, we'll move on to the question that comes into most people's minds: should I come out? The answer always is yes. There is a need to come out. Why is that yes over there? Because otherwise you're burdened with keeping a secret, you're burdened with living a lie. And when you come out, there's going to be a great sense of relief, therefore you must come out. And you affirm your identity. You're not abnormal at all. You have a different degree of, different type of orientation, but the rest of your life can be quite normal. Hopefully it is for many people. Unfortunately, some people have to suffer and they don't really affirm that clear identity because this little secret keeps niggling through their lives. But when we say that one should come out, there is also the need to be a little judicious, a little prudent, maybe postpone things a little. So we might say that, should I come out? Yes, but maybe not just yet. And why would that be? Because people go through a phase which is very commonly in Western literature called curiosity. And they call themselves bi-curious, gay-curious, non-curious, straight-curious, and so forth. Curiosity is when they are not unsure, they're kind of unsure about their orientation, not sure that they really conform to one type of sexuality. And this is a phase that very many people go through. At that stage, it's not a great idea to think about coming out. Many people are also dependent. They're dependent psychologically, they're dependent financially, and unless they have enough of a sense of autonomy, it's best to wait until they can come out. This is related to the fact that many people don't have an adequate emotional and family support, and at that stage, it's better to hold on. Also, if there is an actual threat of abuse and harassment, which attends on so many gay lives, so many alternative sexuality lives, then it's prudent not to come out just then. I'm not saying never come out, but hold on, hold on. Once we've decided that we need to come out, who should I tell? Coming out, as we have already mentioned, is a lifelong process. There will always be new people and new situations in which you will have to decide whether or not to come out. Unfortunately, there is no sure-shot method to tell you with whom the outlook would be good, with whom the outlook would be kind of doubtful. You'd feel more insecure opening to such people, but there is no method of predicting this. You will have to rely on your instincts instead. In general, you should come out first to people you really trust and who you expect will be supportive and respect confidentiality. Coming out to parents or close family members can be an intense experience. And when I say intense experience, it can be intensely positive or it can be intensely negative. And we have to make allowance for that. For this reason, you may want to consider practicing on others. In other words, it's a little bit like role play. You practice with others whom you trust before talking to your family, because that is likely to be less instinct. Rehearsal is always a great strategy in life in general and mental health in particular. So getting the advice of LGBT people who can share what it was like to come out to family members for them, and you can learn from their experience, as we will mention again. Coming out to family can be a source of great support or great angst. Your decision about which family member to come out to and when is a very personal decision that you need to consider very thoughtfully. If you are thinking about coming out to a teacher, guidance counselor, nurse, and this happens much more in the Western schools and colleges, or other officials, you may want to check into your organization's or your school's confidentiality policy first, because some of these policies are really primitive and we have to live with them. In some cases, these professionals will be obligated to share your information with others. It seems crude, it seems cruel, but there it is. If you are considering coming out to friends, choose carefully. Your best friends, or whom you have so far considered your best friends, may not all be the best at keeping secrets. Understand that when you reveal this to them, it is a matter which can very understandably cause consternation or even shock to them. Whether it's because they can't help spreading gossip or these so-called best friends need support themselves in dealing with your news, not everyone is as guarded as we would have liked them to be. So this is what happens. You presume somebody is your best friend, arm around the shoulder, saying that, hey, we're buddies and so forth. But the moment you display, and this spectrum of colors always is used as symbolic, emblematic of the alternative sexualities. The moment this person comes to know that you are otherwise oriented, he feels threatened, he feels unsure, he feels you're impure in some way and kicks at you. This is a very common experience for so many gays. Okay, so finally you're ready. When and how should I come out? There is again no definitive roadmap for how and when to come out. The experiences of others, which I alluded to earlier, can help, as can your objective assessment of those close to you. This is my brother, he understands me, this is my best pal, and he has generally shown a liberal attitude to life. He's always been understanding of my needs, and therefore I feel I can take the chance of opening up to him. Choose a time and day when neither of you, you and the person you're going to come out to, are tired or stressed, and when there is ample time to process and discuss things, because this is an intense experience. Don't ever come out because others are pressurizing you to do so. Also, they say in vino veritas, so have a drink and everything will be much easier. I think there's a limited truth in that statement, but by and large, don't engage in any intensive psychological exercise when you aren't sober. Don't do it out of anger. Don't use this as a weapon to hurt someone. And people have done it, which is why I'm mentioning it. Now, in general, coming out can be a wonderful experience, but only when you are comfortable with your own identity. So unless you are really comfortable with facing up to the fact that your sexual orientation is different, hold your horses. So when you're comfortable with your own identity and ready to share yourself with others, that's when it can be a fulfilling experience. Of course, it depends on the other party as well. And then when you expose yourself, so to say, bare your soul to the other party, what kind of reaction should I expect? First and foremost, it's something that you are doing for yourself. Never lose track of this important facet. So don't let worries about potential reactions. What will he think? What will she think? How are they going to cope? While that should be given some consideration, don't let these worries outweigh your need. So this was, of course, has a small caveat that unless you fear for your safety or security or the safety of other people, then hold on. If possible, choose people to tell who you expect will give you the support, the encouragement that you need and you desire. For most, there will be a time when one needs to come out to someone who may be less than compassionate. This attends on so many alternative sexuality lives. Now, what kind of reaction should I expect if we continue on this theme? Please remember to be patient. The other person, remember, you will not be aware that you have gone through your turmoil, but you should be aware of the fact that you've gone through a turmoil. So allow for some turmoil to be occurring in the person you're opening up to, the person you're coming out to. And this is very important, not to be impatient. Also, take take into account the fact that some will be disappointed. A mother who's hoping to have grandchildren through you is going to be very, very disappointed, and you must make allowance for that. Don't be huffy. It's my life, so you jolly well accept it. That's the attitude of so many, what should I say, rather arrogant. It's an arrogant attitude taken up by many people. Yes, it's your life. No denying it. But because the other people, and in most instances, I guess this is true, but there are, of course, noteworthy exceptions. Not that it isn't your life, but give people the chance to accommodate something which can be quite causing disequilibrium in their lives. Some people, family members particularly, will become distant and detached when this happens. Make allowance for that as well. Be prepared that religion, saying that this is not correct according to the church, this is not correct according to the Vedas, this is not correct according to this, that, and the other, various forms of religion will be chucked at you. Morality, this is immoral. How can you do this? It's between two consenting adults, but everybody doesn't understand that. And they go by orthodoxy and primitive notions. And again, in this country, there is this whole matter of gharane ki izzat, the prestige of the household, the prestige of the family, the prestige of the community, the prestige of the family within the community are all at stake. Unfortunately, there is more than a grain of truth in this, but it's a community that needs to change. It's these values that need to change, not your chance to come out. So be prepared that these things will be flung at you. I would also take into account the fact that anger, violence, and disinheritance. You're no longer my son. I'm going to get a legal document to say that you will inherit not even the little property I have. This is something I faced. I remember one patient's relative who came to me and said that, so you'll have to take this issue up because my boss is very worried about his daughter. The boss happened to be, you remember that Bihar had a lot of crisis and a certain chief minister was not up to the mark, let's say, and the business had moved to Bangalore. And this Bihari father was very upset with the fact that his daughter had a different sexual orientation. And he said, you have to somehow change her doctor. I said, no, I don't do such things. But I agreed to see the young lady. And the young lady was a fine young person. She had an alternative orientation. She was well educated. She was an engineer. She was in love with a journalist of the same gender. And she wanted to settle down with this person. And the father kept saying that I had to change her. So I said, nothing like that will happen. I cannot do this. What I can do is give you time to come to grips with it and help you through this, what is a difficult course for you. So he said, so you won't do it. And the girl had said to me that if I'm forced into a marriage, I'm going to commit suicide. And he was trying to get a very eligible bachelor from the community to marry this young lady. And she, of course, was totally against it. So she was very angry, bitter about this, though she was a very dutiful daughter in many other ways, most every other way. So when the issue came to a head, I told him, I said, listen, if you do this kind of thing, you might drive your daughter to suicide. घराने की इज्जत के लिए वही बेहतर है. It's better she dies rather than she settles down with this rather immoral in this rather immoral way. And that was a shocker to me. It was a learning experience. I was also much younger at that time, and we were not yet armed with the idea that we need to battle this as pathology and not call it pathology. The other reaction that happens, and this has led to many tragedies, even very recently, conversion within inverted commas therapy. There is no such thing as conversion therapy. This country has been, for the last half a decade plus, been very preoccupied with a different kind of forced conversion. But this is yet another facet of forced conversion where your sexual orientation is sought to be changed, altered to, within inverted commas, again, normalcy. When that is something thrust at the person trying to come out, you must resist, you must report it. And now the Psychiatric Society has taken a stance to say that this is not a scientifically sound method of dealing with people who have a different orientation. Please leave them alone, and please reach out to a qualified member of the mental health profession. I hang my head in shame to say that there are a few mental health professionals, some of them very well-intentioned, I admit, who believe that this conversion therapy can take place. But please believe me, nothing like this works. Robustly, we need to refute any notions of conversion therapy, and nobody should be victimized this. I'm getting very het up about this because in recent times, as recently as 2020, there have been 2 cases of suicide. One I know is from Kerala. I forget where the other one is possibly from Kerala again. And this is the kind of thing that happens when we drive people into unscientific treatments that are going to tamper with their lives and their self-esteem. So Tennessee Williams, who faced a very tough time first coming to grips with his own uh, otherwise orientation, and whose family was not kind about his homosexuality, came up with this marvelous statement that it's cynical, but it lasts with me. I got this from Elia Kazan's autobiography, where Tennessee Williams says to him, and Tennessee Williams and Elia Kazan were great showmen apart. Tennessee was Williams was a homosexual, Kazan was not. He said to him, I have friends like you. Friends are God's way of apologizing to us for our families. Tennessee Williams was a brilliant playwright, and I love this statement. So, coming close to the end of my presentation, 10 tips for those who are at the receiving end of this coming out. It takes a lot of courage, please remember, for someone to come out to you, listen to what they have to say without interrupting, without judging, and without tuning out or buying into stereotypes about LGBTQ. One young journalist and author, Kala, no relation of our Dr. Anirudh Kala, the famous psychiatrist, wrote a book on Indian homosexuals. And what he had a stereotype where homosexuals were necessarily very effete, they had limp wrists. That phrase lingers with me. There is no such stereotype. They are as wide as the spectrum of all the Vibgyor colors. Now, the second tip is tell them how pleased you are, or at least that you are pleased that they trusted you, because it wasn't easy for them to come to you. Trusted you enough to share something so personal. Congratulate them on the bravery it took to be so honest. All of them are very nervous and they need that reassurance and that congratulation. Third, let them know that you feel the same way about them as you always have and that nothing has changed. Hopefully, this is the truth, or wait till it is the truth and then engage in sending that kind of statement across. Fourth, ask questions and show that you're interested in learning about their feelings and experiences. Be respectful and stay away from personal issues. For example, do you have sex? Is there a chance you might have HIV? Unless they let you know it's okay to discuss these things, don't infringe on their privacy, although you are the person they've chosen to open up to. If you're feeling uncomfortable or upset about what they have revealed to you, be honest. Let them know that you may take some time to process everything, but acknowledge that this is your problem, that you are adjusting, so give me some time. It's your problem to work out and not really their responsibility. Remember that you cannot and should not try to change them. You have an opportunity here to support, not to reform them. They're not asking to be changed in an overwhelming number of cases. Ask what you can do to support them and what they need from you right now, and of course also later in their lives, because it's a tough life ahead. Eighth, follow up on this. The coming out conversation should be the first of many conversations. Continue to check in and ask questions over a period of time, and those questions should never be stigmatizing. Be open to socializing with their new friends in a variety of settings. Both LGBT and straight friends would be there. Get involved in their community life. Let them know that they don't have to compartmentalize their lives. They don't have to keep families separate because the family is feeling odd about it. Let that not be the case at all. And finally, be an advocate. Read up on LGBT issues, wear LGBT-friendly buttons or stickers when the occasion arises, join a support group, and confront homophobia in whatever ways you can. If you can implement at least 6 of these when somebody opens up to you, somebody comes out to you, that would be a great, great achievement. I'd like to conclude my presentation with lines from a poem anonymously posted on the net. And this is a person who revealed himself to his mother. His mother turned pale, and then he didn't know how to face it. And she called him immoral, she called him amoral, she called him queer, she called him weird, and she tried to put him through therapies to become normal. And he says, every time I looked at myself, I shattered mirrors when they got too close. I didn't want others to see me. I didn't want to see myself because my heart felt broken in so many different ways. I didn't think I'd be able to arrange the pieces in the way they were supposed to look disfigured and wrong. That is the impression never to be conveyed. And that is to make the coming out process a sweet milestone in one's life that will bring this person back into psychological stability. I'd like to thank Suruchi and the Practo team for inviting me over here. I'd like to thank Prasad, who's been anchoring and shouldering the responsibility of these webinars. And I hope Prasad runs an organization for sensitizing the medical profession to issues of alternative sexuality. And I must congratulate him on the wonderful work they have been doing. And I'd like to thank Amrit for those kind words of introduction again. And thank you very much for your patient listening. I'd be glad to take comments and questions at the end of the webinar.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bide, for this wonderful talk. Indeed, coming out is something that we go through throughout our life, as you mentioned, at various stages. And many of us do go through denial, repression, and some of us do finally achieve acceptance. And I hope many of us do that. I really like the point that you made about having compassion for people to whom you are coming out to. Each of us are going through a lot of turmoil. Having compassion for those people also is very important. In today's talk, because of the lack of time that we had, Dr. Bhide has only covered about coming out from the sexuality point of view. But when you talk about coming out from the gender point of view, it is even probably a bigger challenge and a bigger problem that many people who are gender fluid or transgender face. And we'll probably take that up as a separate topic sometime later. And we today have Dr. Suresh Baramat also, who's an expert on these topics. In his talk, he's going to cover that. With that, I want to introduce you to the next speaker, Dr. Kersi Chowda. Dr. Kersi is a colleague of mine, and I'm really privileged to have been working with him for last many years at Sir H.N. Reliance Foundation Hospital. He's a very well-known psychiatrist in Mumbai. He has been on the chairperson of the LGBT task force for Indian Psychiatry Society, and he has been, his CV is very long for me to read today, but he was also part of the team that got the letter from IPS before the battle for 377. And we are very thankful to Dr. Bide, Dr. Kersi, and the entire team for achieving that. Over to you, Dr. Kersi Chowda. Thank you.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to deal with doctors, and it's always a pleasure also to do stuff related to something that I believe is extremely important. I think it is extremely important for us in the medical profession to be aware of the various issues that take up, as Prasad said, between 8 and 10% of the population. A lot of us are uncomfortable dealing with this. I mean, very often when I've been having seminars, I do say that however broad-minded or far-reaching your family is, it's extremely unlikely that over the breakfast table you're going to talk about being gay or being gender fluid. That doesn't normally happen. Things are changing now. The younger generation is much more open than maybe we were. So I was asked to talk about depression and loneliness in the LGBTQ population, and that is what I'm going to do. I'd like to say a very major thank you to Amrit, who's so kindly going to be looking after the slides, because almost invariably I fumble at them. So Amrit, the next one, please. What are the facts? Approximately 31% of LGBT elders reported having clinical depression. More than half had been told by a doctor that they had depression. Many older adults have seriously thought about suicide in their lifetimes. And the frightening thing is transgenders, up to 71% of them would have thought very seriously of committing suicide. What are the issues? There's tremendous social isolation, including profound feelings of loneliness. 59% of elders feel that they lack companionship. 53% feel isolated from others. And 53% just feel left out. I mean, even if you're an ally, you're supportive of the group, very often in our conversations, there are homophobic jokes, there are transphobic jokes. And if a person is there and listening to this all the time, initially he might laugh. Over a period of time, of course, it's going to affect him. He's going to then feel isolated. Many LGBT elders have lived a lifetime of stigma and discrimination. including having lived through an era where sexual orientation was pathologized as a mental illness. Hence, they often delay seeking help. It might be changing now to some extent after 377 has been repealed, but we still have a very, very long way to go. Next, please. The American Journal of Epidemiology came out with a 12-month prevalence rate for major depressive disorder as 10.3% for gay men compared to 7.2% for heterosexual men. That's a huge increase in population in terms of numbers. In the archives of general psychiatry in Jan 2017, the lifetime prevalence rate of major depressive disorders amongst gay, lesbian, and bisexual people was supposed to be 71.4% compared to 38.2% amongst heterosexuals. They also had twice the rate of anxiety disorders and had much, much more likelihood of substance abuse. Next, please. What is significant is that LGBT does not actually contribute to depression or anxiety. But because of being LGBT, they face a variety of realities in their lives that increase the likelihood that they will have depression or anxiety. And then that becomes a cause for the way they feel. Next, please. The current culture is still not one that is very affirmative to the LGBT identities. So this has a negative impact on your self-esteem. Often the community starts believing the negative messages that they are given. And we all say, don't walk like a gay. Why are you talking like, you're a lesbian? Oh, look at him. He's laughing in that stupid fashion. All of these things, which we think should not make a difference, it does make a difference. Pejorative words for LGBT people are often used unchallenged. And then this sends a message that it's okay to hold negative beliefs about LGBT. And that is very sad. It's still very, very rare that you find somebody standing up for a pal who might be teased because of his sexual orientation. There's a term called minority stress. And what does that mean? This term is used to describe chronically high levels of stress experienced by members of any stigmatized minority group just because they are the members of the group. So this is the stress that is associated with discrimination, prejudice, and with this particular group of people with homophobia and transphobia. If there is constant stress related to it, this is what minority stress is all about. And this stress becomes then a significant contributor to depression and anxiety, as well as physical concerns such as hypertension. So there's an enormous amount of physical effects also that ensue just because of the stress and the anxiety that being a member of this community causes in a person who gets affected. Interestingly, the degree to which the individual is affected by minority stress seems to be directly related to their own internalized transphobia or homophobia. Let's face it, everybody wants to be usual, normal, so-called normal, the regular. Nobody wants to start thinking differently. Very often you're brought up anyway in an environment where there is transphobia or homophobia. People get scared when they look at maybe transgender people. People see movies where there is obvious discrimination shown towards it. If you've been brought up on a diet like this, if your family is extremely phobic in this direction, and suddenly you start thinking that you are having a problem related to what you felt you should be phobic about, it causes tremendous problems. So it's very often your own internalized transphobia or homophobia that actually causes you to get affected. However, if you have your own healthy self-image, then you're less likely to be impacted by minority stress. So a large amount of the stress that you are experiencing is actually because of your own attitude towards what is happening. Once again, gay men seem primed to expect rejection. They struggle to assert themselves. They replay their social failures on a loop. But it's also true that a lot of bullying takes place in their head. And that seems to be also because they become so sensitive initially that it kind of primes them. And a lot of the stuff does seem to happen in their head and not actually in real life. The trauma for gay men also seems to be the prolonged nature of it. There was William Elder. He was a sexual trauma researcher and a psychologist. He came out with a statement that if you experience one traumatic event, you have the kind of post-traumatic stress disorder that might be resolved in 4 to 6 months of therapy. But if you experience years and years of small stressors, little things which are constant, and you start thinking, was that because of my sexuality? Then that lasts for an extremely long time as well. Now, this is also true for lesbians. This is also true for the trans person. So I might keep talking of the gay person, but we are seeing this in all kinds of gender issues. What are microaggressions? These are supposed to be brief and commonplace verbal, behavioral, and environmental acts that reinforce stigma towards a minority group. So being called funny names, people walking up to you menacingly and saying, ha ha, you're a faggot. Environmental acts which make it difficult, for example, even for you to use a particular train compartment, for you to use a particular toilet. These are things that reinforce stigma towards a minority group. This can be directed towards an individual who's a member of any minority group, but it's very much seen with the LGBT community. So for example, can you go back, please? The bisexual might be told, bisexuals don't exist. It's all in your head. It's because you are coming from that kind of society where you're given too much importance. We'll just slap you and you'll be fine. Stuff like that causes tremendous trauma to the person. Next, please. There's a need to conform. Ajit had started off by talking of coming out, but sometimes you do not come out. This reduces the negative impact towards themselves. And a lot of people just cannot take the negative impact that they feel will happen to them when they come out. And often they have mixed emotions at the time that they do come out. There's a little bit of elation, there's a little bit of relief, there's tremendous anxiety, there's occasionally depression, there's a lot of fear. They don't know whether or not they will be accepted. Very often they are, very often it's in their heads, but very often they're not. Often there is family rejection. Ajit had come out with that little vignette about the person from the lady who was attempting not to get married according to the father. And that we see still all the time, which is also seen with cultures. There are maybe some cultures and some religions where it's a little easier to accept than others, but I mean, it's almost across the spectrum. And unfortunately, there's a lot of violence associated with it. And when you have violence associated with just wanting to be with some person, then you just say that it doesn't make sense, let me conform. So you start conforming, and that causes anxiety and that causes depression, because in a way, you know you're living a lie. Next, please. What is re-traumatization? You grow up with this loneliness, you accumulate all this baggage, and then you arrive in a gay commune thinking that you will finally be accepted for what you are. And then you realize, what the heck, everybody here has baggage as well. So life may not be as easy, even if you come out and you're in a gay commune or you're in gay friends. Everybody has their own problems. Everybody has their own idiosyncrasies, which might again cause stress. So all of a sudden, it's not your gayness that gets you rejected. It might be your weight, it might be your income, it might be your race, it might be the color of your skin. And then you start saying, what on earth is happening? I'm getting traumatized again. Next, please. So gay and bisexual men actually talk about the gay community as a significant source of stress in their life. The fundamental reason is the in-group discrimination, which does more harm to your psyche than being rejected by members of the majority. I mean, it might be easy to ignore and roll your eyes and put up the middle finger to straight people who do not like you because you don't need their approval anyway. But rejection from other gay or lesbian or transgender people makes you feel that you're losing your only way of making friends and finding love. Being pushed away from your own people hurts you more because you need them more, and that is a fact of life. A lot of people talk about the fact that they are more traumatized by people from their own community who do not accept them for whatever reason, and they don't really give a damn about the straight person because they say, who the hell cares about the straight person? But when your own community rejects you, it causes tremendous anguish. Next, please. What are the special issues which might aggravate psychological and psychiatric disorders as well? There is a higher risk for substance abuse. Apparently, there is more use of psychoactive drugs by the community. There seems to be a higher risk of suicide, especially in families which are non-accepting, especially where there's too much of trauma and violence. It causes a problem. Sometimes there is increased sexual activity used as a coping skill or as a feeling of having an intimate moment, and it might actually land up being like a crutch. And there's constant hypervigilance. You're constantly evaluating your surroundings for safety. This again might be reducing ever since 377 has been repealed, but it is still very much there. I have a huge number of clients from the community who keep telling me about their constant fear for safety. Next, please. So what can be done? First of all, considering this is actually due to medical people, I think we need to behave ourselves. We need to be more accepting. We need to work towards dealing with our own homophobia, if we have any, or our own gay phobias, or our own trans phobias, or our own biphobias. It is absolutely essential for us to be accepting, to be an ally. I mean, it's so sad at times when Prasad sends me clients who need help, and he will tell me, can you please name a gay-friendly person, a lesbian-friendly doctor, a trans-friendly person? All of us should be like that. So we certainly need to work on ourselves. Psychotherapy is known to help manage stress and self-acceptance. We attempt to help in the building of positive relationships, and we help them to avoid isolation, which is an absolute must, because huge numbers, especially of the adult population belonging to this particular group, land up being extremely isolated, and we have to help them not become reclusive. Next, please. Occasionally, medication is needed. If the person is extremely depressed, extremely anxious, if he's suicidal, if there is aggression, if there's tremendous panic attacks, we might need to evaluate and give medication as well. Next, please. In 1986, and I found this apt even today, in the US, a man once wrote, "For years, I've noticed the divergence between my straight friends and my gay friends. When one half of my social circle has disappeared into relationships, into kids and suburbia, the other has struggled through isolation and anxiety, hard drugs, and risky sex. There has been some change, legally, socially, and even in pop culture. Gay characters these days are even so commonplace that they are even allowed to have flaws, which is wonderful." Next, please. All the unbearable statistics of unhappiness and anxiety and suicide still lead to the same conclusion. It is still dangerously alienating to go through life as a man attracted to other men or a woman attracted to another woman, or not just following the usual norms that society believes is normal. The good news, cynical though it may seem, is that epidemiologists and social scientists and psychiatrists are closer than ever to understanding all the reasons why. Next, please. Thank you very much. Thank you, Amrit. You've been a sweetheart.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kelsey, for that very comprehensive talk about these issues in LGBT community. And I really like the point that you mentioned about minority stress, because that is a big issue which not just LGBT community, but many minority communities face, and it has an impact on their health. And I completely agree, as a gay man, I completely agree with you that there's a lot of stress that we get from the community itself, unfortunately. For example, married gay men have it, really difficult. Bisexual men or women have it really difficult from gay men or lesbian women. And of course, transgender people get it really, very difficult from many members of the LGBT community. So that brings us to the next talk by Dr. Suresh Baramat. Dr. Suresh is a professor of psychiatry at NIMHANS, and he's also the head of community psychiatry, head of head of telemedicine center, and in charge of the adult psychiatry unit at Bangalore. And I remember meeting Dr. Suresh first time in forensic psychiatric conference at Pune, and I was just awestruck by his oratory skills. He's an amazing speaker and very engaging, and of course the content is always excellent. So over to you, Dr. Suresh. Thank you.
Thank you, Prasad. Thank you, the Practo, for bringing this wonderful seminar. Before I start, I would like to have a disclaimer. This presentation is for academic purpose. If you would like to have a legal opinion, please do contact an advocate. Conflict of interest, none. So my presentation has 3 parts into this. The part 1 is I'll discuss about the case laws very briefly and the legislation which was implemented just 1 year back, not even 1 year back, hardly around 8 months back, and the guidelines which I'm going to discuss. So first part, fighting for fundamental rights in the independent India. So what we call it as the friction started in section 377 IPC Indian Penal Code. And if you know, Indian Penal Code was written somewhere in 1860s by Lord Macaulay, and we continued that without even amending it. And we just followed. Actually, in 1960, the UK changed their law, but not us. We continued that. And what does section 377 say? It's basically about unnatural sexual offenses. Homosexuality will be punished for life imprisonment. Imagine life imprisonment or 10 years imprisonment with or without fine. So there was a study, basically looked into how many people were punished. It was hardly 200. But the issue was not 200. The issue is threatening that I'm going to put you behind bar and harassing them, taking money out of them. That was ubiquitously present across India. So for this, the LGBT community fought. For their support, the first, most probably the one of the best foundation, NAS Foundation, basically an NGO in Delhi, working for people suffering from HIV and AIDS, they put a PIL in 2001. And in 2004, the Delhi High Court dismissed the case, telling that NAS Foundation does not have any locus of standi. Of course, NAS Foundation went to Supreme Court. The Supreme Court sent back the case telling that they have a locus of standi. Delhi High Court, please look into the matter. So in 2004, again, the case was taken up by the Delhi High Court. And the Delhi High Court, 2 benches judge, gave a landmark decision in 2009. If you would like to read, please read this. This summates the whole, whatever the fight they have gone through. And they clearly said that in the Delhi High Court in 2009, section 377 violates the fundamental rights of the homosexuality. Basically, right to equality, right to freedom guaranteed under the fundamental rights, which is everybody is enjoying, but not them. So section 377 only, adult consensual sex, was decriminalized. But the rest, section 377 continued. But however, there are certain group of community did not like this judgment. They appealed to the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, Supreme Court in 2014 gave a verdict telling that the Delhi High Court decision in 2009 is constitutionally unsustainable. And they said that the parliament is the only place where the law can be made, not the court. And again, ladies and gentlemen, and my friends, on one hand, the Delhi High Court upheld, but the Supreme Court said no. During this process, there was one more landmark decision which came in. That is Justice K.S. retired Puttaswamy versus Union of India. Here, the Puttaswamy, what he did was he put a case, basically PIL, discussing about the constitutionality of the Aadhaar card, whether it violated the right to privacy. If you ask me, this is one of the best judgment the Supreme Court of India has given after the independence. And in this case, ladies and gentlemen, the court clearly said that right to privacy is a fundamental right. So my dear friends, you are on Practo or you may be on various telemedicine platform. Now, right to privacy is a fundamental right, and it comes under the ambit of Article 21. And in the same judgment, they also made an indication telling that sexual orientation comes under the person's privacy. That means it is also a fundamental right. So with this judgment in 2017, 2018, the landmark judgment, which all of you know, Navtesh Singh versus Union of India, the Supreme Court was categorically clearly said that Section 377 interferes in the homosexual's private life, and it violates the Constitution of India. And the Supreme Court was very categorical. It said that it disregarded the public majority opinion. Let me be very clear, because majority of the time we say the majority who votes will decide the law. But here the Supreme Court was very clear. It's maybe majority, but the minority is suffering and they have to be protected. So in this case, it clearly said that consensual sexual act between adults to be protected and it cannot be punishable. And with this judgment, ladies and gentlemen, Section 377 cannot be used against homosexuality or transgender people. However, this Section 377 continues to be hold good, especially if there is a carnal sexual intercourse against the minor or act of bestiality, or even against the consent of an adult if it is done. With this, this was at the criminal front, they are fighting for the fundamental rights. Now the civil rights, that's fighting for the identity, because if you look at the whole scenario, it's the identity. It is the identity of a person. So in this regard, NALSA, that is National Legal Service Authority Act versus Union of India, they fought the case, and the Supreme Court, again in this case, clearly said that third gender has to be recognized. It's not a binary, our society, and transgender have right to declare their self-identified gender. So third gender was recognized. At the same time, it also said that Section 14, 15, 19, and 21 was violating. So clearly said that they are not equal at this point of time. So the government has to make appropriate, what we call it as protection, and socially and educationally backward classes as a citizen of these transgender need to be given some kind of reservation or some social welfare measures has to be done. At the same time, the Supreme Court also said that the medical care should be provided at every hospital, basically in the public sphere. That's what the Supreme Court said. Now that was the judicial activism which happened. Culmination of all this judicial activism came into part 2, that is Transgender Rights, basically Protection of Act, which was passed on 2019, December 5th. How many of you know about this legislation? I don't know, but this is the recent legislation on 5th December. It was passed. It has hardly 23 clauses, 9 chapters. Again, here the transgender definition is similar to that. It says that a person who is born whose gender does not match with the assigned gender at birth. But however, they have included intersex here in this definition. This has irked many of the transgender, because intersex are basically hermaphrodite, that is basically a person who has ambiguous genitalia, also included as transgender. But however, there is no core identity issue. But however, the drafter of the law was very clear. He said that let us be very comprehensive. So the transgender definition has been very comprehensive. With this, the Section 3 talks about prohibition against discrimination. Discrimination in any sphere, government or public or private, either in education, employment, healthcare services. Ladies and gentlemen, healthcare services, because many of these transgender go to public hospitals and they are being just shooed away. They said, you don't come inside the hospital. Even in the hotel, they don't allow them to come inside the hotel. That kind of discrimination is punishable offense now. Coming to Section 4 to 6 and 7, this is about the certification. I'm going to discuss a little bit in the later part of it, my presentation. Section 8 talks about the welfare measures which the government has to make it. And if a person with transgender do not have any house or homeless, rescue, rehabilitation, and protection to be done. And Section 9 to 14 talks about anti-discrimination and grievance process to be put in place. Section 15, there is a specific mention about healthcare issues. In this, the right to access for HIV serosurveillance, especially centers to be done for transgender separately, healthcare access, hormonal therapy, sexual reassignment surgery, and a health manual has to be drafted as per Section 15D clause, review of medical curriculum. This is which have been fought. Now it is a part of a legislation. Now all undergraduate medical need to learn about transgender health, or what we call it as sexual minority. comprehensive health insurance scheme has to be formed. And Section 16 talks about National Council of Transgender Persons. And finally, the offenses and penalties, which goes up to 2 years of imprisonment. But 2 days back, that is on 21st August, National Council has been formulated. It is now gazetted today. It is available on the website, and the National Council for Transgender is now available, and they are going to formulate the policies. Coming to the certification, which is more controversy and more discussion to occurs in the area of, so we will discuss about this. The certification, ladies and gentlemen, there are two types in this. One is certification of transgender, that is section 4 to 6. And the other one is certification of gender and gender ID. So these are the two different, what we call it as certification has been formed under the law. Coming to the draft rules, unfortunately, majority of us do not know this draft rules was put up in the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. The last date was 18th May. None of us bothered about these rules, but the rules is been now, the input has been taken. It is waiting for notification. What does the draft rules say? The draft rules regarding certification is very clear. A transgender person, whoever it is, transgender, he feels that he is a transgender, does not fit to what we call it as the biological gender, he will apply in form number 1. This is the form number 1, an application. Along with the form number 1, he is going to put an affidavit telling that he is a transgender. Along with form number 1, form number 2, a psychologist report, not a medical report or a psychiatrist report, a psychologist report. Along with this 3 report, he is going to file it with the district magistrate where the transgender is residing since past 1 year. Once the district magistrate gets these 3 documents, within 60 days, he has to issue the certificate, that is transgender ID certificate, that is form number 3. Along with this, he has to issue a transgender ID card. This is within 60 days. The time limits are very clear. And now, once the person has undergone SRS, or that is sexual reassignment surgery, or he is already has undergone, or he is planning to undergo, or if he has undergone, then again, he will apply for gender certificate now. What does the gender certificate talk about? Again, the form number 1 and form number 2, or else if he had got the transgender ID card. Along with that, now he requires a medical certificate that he has undergone SRS surgery. That is sexual reassignment surgery. Again, SRS should be of genital surgery. Along with this, it should be from the same jurisdiction where he is living in the past 1 year. That has to be there very clearly. And the district magistrate has to issue the certificate in form number 4. That is gender certificate this is. And next one is gender ID. Please do understand the 2 certificates, transgender certificate, gender certificate. But the transgender certificate is enough for all social welfare measures. And transgender certificate entitles all transgender to change their gender in all documents, including birth certificate, along with even changing their name, first name, they can change in all their documents. And whenever they are going to apply for change of name or the gender to any establishment, either it may be school, colleges, within 15 days they have to do. That has been very clearly documented in the rules. So coming to the last part of my presentation, the role of psychiatrist. See, till now I talked about the legal issues. Now I will talk about the clinician issues. There are some here and there discussion. I would like to get the clarification from the transgender group. I've been discussing in Bangalore. The Bangalore is one of the biggest hub, and I've been working with Sangama, Vandade, Samara. There are various organizations. There are beautiful people who are working there. And coming to the role of psychiatrist, first and the foremost, whenever you are registering the transgender people, please do register in their biological gender and their first name, like whatever during birth or certificate name. Because whenever you are going to issue a certificate, you have to say that the person came with this gender and he wants to become this gender. So it will be easy. Otherwise, what happens is you register their name, which has been altered, the gender has been altered, and tomorrow when they are asked for a certificate, they are already a female. And why you want to give another one certificate? They want to become a female. So it has to be biological gender and first name. Along with this, a manual has to be drafted, and it's almost completed, the manual, which will be drafted by Niman's forensic psychiatry team, and it will be shared with IPS and various people to get the opinion along with the transgender community. And Prasad Dandekar is also will be part of reviewing this. And at present, the role of psychiatrist is limited, and legally for certification is not there. And however, for a clinical purpose, it is there for diagnosis, basically for ensuring, telling that it's a transgender. If there is any comorbidity to be addressed, coming out, helping them, supporting them, family therapy, if required, because one of the issue in transgender is keeping the family together. If you don't keep the family, the transgender will be thrown apart into the big society. And transgender community itself being there is stressful to many young kids. And finally, that the medical certification, basically for hormonal therapy and sexual reassignment surgery, should psychiatrists be involved? And I had an opportunity to talk to a couple of transgender group people. They were very clear. Why do you want to come between us and our gender identity? If we require, we will ask you. Otherwise, please don't make a part of it. So that was the response. For hormonal therapy, requirement will be 18 years, or else if they are less than 18, parents' consent is must. And next is very essential is confirmation of gender dysphoria, supportive therapy optional, and addressing comorbid condition, one psychiatrist referral, if only if a endocrinologist asks. If they don't ask, no, there is no role of a psychiatrist apart from being addressing the comorbidity and helping them to come out. This should be the role of psychiatrists. We should not unnecessarily go and poke our nose. But many of our psychiatrists may not like it. But however, the transgender community is very, very vocal, and they are very clear there should be less people in between them and their identity. Coming to the SRS, for sexual reassignment surgery, it has to be an adult, that is above 18. Confirmation of gender dysphoria, supportive therapy and hormonal therapy, they are basically optional. That is, psychotherapy is optional. Addressing comorbid condition is very essential. And 1 year real life experience. That is, they have to live in their real life, what we call it as assigned gender. That's a test which they have to undergo. If they are living in that, there is no problem. And the district magistrate issuing the gender identity card should be given. Along with this, one psychiatrist referral for SRS. So telemedicine should be used as much as possible. And once the rapport is built, please use online for the transgender support. Of course, many of them are able to use because telemedicine is a boon, but the access to technology is one of the biggest limitation. To my last slide, ladies and gentlemen, LGBT community has come a long way in their legal battle for fighting for their rights. Still, there is a long way to go regarding their marriage, recognition, adoption, social welfare pension, job, reservation, education reservation in all educational institution is very essential. So all this presentation is available in my YouTube channel and also LinkedIn. Please do subscribe to the channel. And thank you very much for your patience listening. Stay safe.
Thank you very much, Dr. Suresh, for that wonderful, comprehensive presentation. And we cannot emphasize enough about what the transgender persons go through. They not only face problems from the community at large, but also from LGBT community, and it's a difficult journey for them. And I'm glad that people such as you are very actively involved in changing that, and we thank you for doing that. So that was our last presentation for the day, and we will now move on to the question and answer session. Can Dr. Kersi also come on video, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So we have first a very interesting question, comment on Dr. Bhide's talk. And it's about, if a person approaches you before coming out, will you reveal it to the family members?
Not on my own, never. If the person is comfortable and needs my assistance, definitely. It is something that is confided in me, and I must respect the confidentiality of that matter. So if the person, very often, and this has happened more than 20 times in my clinical practice, much more so in the last 7-8 years, that you have to assist the family to come to grips with it. If you assist the person who is coming out, and I think you're a facilitator in very many processes. Yesterday I was mentioning we were discussing, Suresh and I, about what is and what is not pathology. For example, we intervene in marital disharmony. It's not necessarily disease. So in a similar way, this is a crisis situation. We have psychological expertise. and we intervene over there. So yes, we would take a role over there, but we would never break confidentiality and reveal anything that is personal to a patient to the other. There are two exceptions that I was taught by my forensic teacher in undergrad days. If it's a crime against the country and if it involves murdering somebody. If these two things are not there, confidentiality must be respected. It's the paramount of clinical practice. It's paramount principle in clinical practice.
Thank you very much, because we unfortunately do see a number of healthcare professionals not unfortunately following that rule, and we cannot overemphasize the importance of privacy. So the same person has also asked, how will you confirm that your patient is not dual oriented? If he or she is, then what will be your treatment plan? I'm not sure what they mean by dual orientation. I don't know if
I
it
think
means
bisexuality is what is
Yeah.
conveyed to me.
Yeah.
Or I don't think trans can coexist with any of the other orientations. Kersey had a nice statement in one of his slides, which said that bisexuals don't exist. So that's an attitude. I was surprised to read one of the leading gay activists who really got me involved in this whole exercise, who also a friend from my days in drama, who said that bisexuality is just a front which many people put up to hide their gay orientation. I think that's an extreme position, and that might be the truth for a minuscule of cases, but not for a vast majority. Bisexuality very much exists. We see it as the orientation of a sizable number of people. They're still a minority, but they're there. So I think, how will you confirm that your patient is not dual convergent? You'll ask him, are you attracted to men? Are you attracted to women? In which case, there is such a thing as bisexuality. Maybe you're oriented in this fashion. And there are a number, you spoke about married gay men. I remember, Prasad, you've made presentations on that also. I think a number of married gay men actually might be bisexual. I would hazard a guess of 60-40, that 60% of them are purely gay, 40% of them have a bisexual orientation, which is how they could survive in a marriage in many instances, not every instance, of course.
Yeah, the issues of married gay men and married lesbian women are really something that we need to do. We as a society need to do something about, because most of the gay men in this country are married to women, and most of the lesbian women in this country are married to women. The out gay man and out lesbian women that you see on the street, and people such as me, are the minuscule minorities of the minority. We don't represent the gay community or the lesbian community. The majority of them have very different battles to fight. So the next question is, how is internalized homophobia dealt with? And how is self-acceptance practically encouraged, especially with the majority normative society encouraging the opposite?
I suppose that's related to me because I had brought it out.
Yeah.
Okay. So a large amount of homophobia is actually related to fear of the unknown. There's a lot of stuff associated with, is he going to do this? Is she going to do that? Is something going to happen? And I think as one learns over a period of time, as one interacts with more and more people over a period of time, as hopefully more and more seminars like this take place, where you actually start seeing things through a slightly different prism, then your internalized homophobia, transphobia, biphobia should actually start to reduce, because a lot of it is only related to the unknown. When we started off, when Ajit was the president and he made me the chairperson, and Avinash was the convener and Amrit was the co-chair, so we are all here right now, there were so many comments that came to us even from medical professionals saying, silly stuff like pedophilia and bestiality and stuff like that. And a lot of it is really related to ignorance. So my feeling is the more we learn about issues, the more we interact with people, the less phobic we are going to be, the more accepting we are going to be. Eventually, who the hell cares? I mean, provided you're a good person, who the hell cares what your sexual orientation is, frankly? How do I deal with people who have an internalized homophobia? We talk to them about their own feelings. A lot of them might have issues related to their own sexuality, and we have to help them with that as well. And we give them time. So, you might be irritated and you might say, how can you think this and what can you think? But we've grown up with years of conditioning. We don't have to rush into anything. Just give them a little bit of time. Some amounts of therapy, if they're very, very badly affected, can also help. If you're very anxious related to this, it can also help. I think basically just learn more about it, attend more seminars about it, interact with more and more people from the community, and you'll realize that everybody's the same.
But Dr. Kelsey, I want to again sort of bring out the fact that members of the LGBT community themselves have a lot of internalized homophobia.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guilt and shame that brews inside.
And to that,
how do you deal with that?
So, I mean, as you're aware, since you send me so many cases of the same, what we normally do is we do therapy. So there's a lot of supportive therapy. There's a lot of looking at psychoeducational stuff. There's a lot of acceptance also, because a lot of people grow up thinking that they're never just going to be accepted because of the way they feel towards a particular sex, or the way they feel about their own bodies, or the way they feel, which has been reinforced into them either by non-accepting people. So we do therapy. There are times I do it. There are times that I would maybe refer to somebody who I feel might be extremely good at a particular kind of therapy. And if there is an actual psychiatric disorder that occurs just because you're so anxious and nervous and tense and so on and so forth, then we do other things as well in terms of medication. There was this homophobic thing of medication and related to the psychiatrists and conversion therapy. Yes, in the past, we certainly haven't distinguished ourselves. I mean, conversion therapy used to happen. I mean, as Ajit says, it still does occasionally. But I think we've shifted a huge way away from it. And now people are aware of the fact that it is actually now an illegal act. It is a crime, and we are not supposed to do it. Acceptance, time, give us time also. I mean, we've all grown up in that same society. So we also have to learn how to deal with a difference.
Absolutely. The next is actually a comment and not a question, but I want to just read it out because, again, I want to re-emphasize this. Bisexual, lesbian, and transgender intersex people are the minority within the minority, and most articles and other writings have missed out on the concerns that the transgender people face. Sometimes it is assumed that talking about gay men is enough and can be applied as it is to people with gender dysphoria. And this is a huge problem that we face because even within the LGBT community, you see that for some reason, the number of gay men who are out especially seems much higher than any other part of the community. And it's sort of, you go for any of the event, you would see largely gay men and then a few lesbians and a few transgender individuals. And that is not a true representation. And we do need to speak up about issues faced by lesbian women as well as transgender individuals and the entire spectrum. I completely agree with that. The next question is, what are the reliable sources to learn about transgender health? And what about a role of a psychologist in this? Dr. Suresh, do you want to take this?
The best place to learn is about the WPATH guidelines, which is earlier Harry Benjamin protocol, which has been available. It is available freely online. Please do read about that. It's a wonderful book about the various types of surgeries, what are the different types of psychotherapies can be done. So that is the best place to access. And there have been now, I think University of California has come up with the guidelines for transgender health. And I think that's the wonderful place to learn about. Coming to the role of psychologist, the problem is if you are referring as a psychologist, there has been the exposure to working with the LGBT community will be very less. But however, the law says that psychologist will be, that too from the government establishment, the psychologist will be certifying them. But the role of psychologist is, of course, similar to providing support, helping in the family therapy, coming out. Basically, those are the areas. And see, please do remember, I'm talking from the transgender perspective because I've been working with them since long time, almost 8 to 10 years since Professor Shekhar Sheshadri introduced to the group. So the only thing is which helped a lot is keeping the family together. Make sure that the transgender person does not move out of the family. If you are able to do that, as a psychologist, you have done the maximum benefit to the person who is a transgender and also to the family. Of course, that's the first thing. Of course, the rest of the things, they require support for a long time, because invariably their relationship is not been, the legal sanctity has not been given. So domestic violence is very high in their relationship, and breaking of relationship is very common there. And there, the attempt to suicide is very high. Even the suicide is very high, even in the transgender community. So in all those highly stressful environment, the role of mental health professionals do play a very important role. Of course, substance abuse is very high. And nowadays, the violence against the transgender has come down remarkably. Earlier, the violence from the state, by the police, by the antisocial elements, because they want money from them. So they will be used for various purpose. I'll give a couple of examples where one of the person was a transgender. He did not have money. Police made him to stand near a bus stand, that too near the city bus stand. And basically a person, homosexual, approached him. So they caught the homosexual and they said, "Oh, where is your house? Where are you working? If you don't give $20,000, we are going to put you in jail for the homosexual." So it became, they used to extract money from the, what we call it as the client, and also with the transgender. And the transgender will be caught between the police and the client. And it's a very embarrassing, and many times they have been beaten up. So in this such scenario where the family has, many a time they have been kicked out, and then they are the transgender community, there also there will be a fight. They have their own culture, attaining nirvana and giving half of their earnings to the guru. So these kind of scenario, many of them come out and they fight against their own community. And during that time, the psychologist, or basically I would rather say mental health professional, do a very important role. And definitely we have to keep them going. That's what it matters most. And at this point of time, I don't know how many of you know, during this pandemic, their life has become very miserable. And you don't know, if you talk to them, then only you realize how they are making their living at this point of time.
Yeah, you mentioned about pandemic, and everybody keeps saying, "Oh, we are in the same boat." And I say, we are not in the same boat. We are in the same stormy ocean. Some of us are on cruise liners and some of us are on land. It is very difficult for everyone. Dr. Kersey, there's a question for you. Would you please tell us which psychological interventions or methods would you employ while treating MDD amongst LGBT individuals? And what could school teachers do if a child confides in them regarding their sexuality or gender dysphoria?
I think that comes to me. Second time.
Okay. So we leave it to Ajit. For the first one, just like Suresh had said, I think basically what we need to do is just be as in psychological interventions, one would normally be as supportive as possible. Occasionally, one might use a specific kind of therapy if one feels that there is severe depression or severe anxiety. But I think basically what we just do is support and support and support for a very long time period. And it works for both. If the person has come out to the family, then we have to be supportive to the family as well. If he has not, then we respect his right not to come out, and we just support him through the entire period till he chooses to come out or not. So the basic therapy that is used is of being just supportive, and specific things if there is evidence of an actual psychiatric disorder, which can also happen, obviously. Ajit, over to you for the school.
Yeah, I think being married to a school teacher who's faced this actual situation, I think it's a very delicate situation. And I think ideally, we'd like to involve the family after checking with the child whether he's comfortable with the idea. Earlier, we were talking about how a psychiatrist has a role in intervening with the family, respecting confidentiality. Similarly, now many schools have school counselors, and I think this really should go on to a sufficiently committed, competent school counselor. And the family must be thought of as the agency that is going to have to absorb this alternative behavior that this, or orientation that this person has. And as far as possible, the family should be involved in this. But there are families where the boy is very scared that if I say this to my father, I'm going to get kicked. So in that case, say that you have to wait. You have to wait till you're mature and there's somebody to support you. The teacher can't take the role of handling the whole situation himself. And here I think referral to a mental health professional, if no school counselor is available, would be in order. What will the mental health professional again do? Again, play by the ear. If family can be counseled over a period of time, not in one sitting, very, very rarely will everything settle in one sitting. I have been surprised sometimes by parents who are quite broad-minded compared to what the child's prejudiced mind had to say. But by and large, the prejudice is quite deep-rooted. So it takes time, it takes skill to weed out that prejudice over a period of time, or at least reduce it. It's not the school teacher's job to entirely deal with it. The teacher must be somebody the child chooses to confide in. Most commonly because the teacher has conveyed a certain sense of psychological dependability. Sometimes, and this also does happen, the sexual attraction to the teacher. Now, not to be missed in the case of young children. Please keep that in mind as well.
Yeah. So the next question is, what advice would you provide to bisexuals regarding coming out? There is always a confusion between choosing a partner. Do we even need to confirm anyone's orientation or gender unless it's a concern to the client?
To my knowledge, most of them survive in both spheres, each hidden from the other. So they have a homosexual life, they have a heterosexual life, both of which are satisfying to the individual. It's a prolonged game of hide and seek, as far as I know. There are very few people. There's only one couple I know where the husband was bisexual and the wife accepted it because she said, "Nahi to naak kat jayegi." That's exactly the kind of. She says he goes out with the boys sometimes. I let him do that, and then for 2 or 3 days, I will not let him sleep with me. There are different coping strategies that different people adopt. There are women who have grossly objected to any other partner. This is not about promiscuity. This is more about bisexual orientation. And then said that I will not survive in this marriage. It's led to divorce. So if you are bisexual and you need to come out, I think you must check how accommodative your spouse is going to be and only then come out with it. If your spouse is not likely to be accommodative, then be prepared for the eventuality that this relationship may have to break it as, what should I say, as pleasantly as possible. Or you lead your double life, which has its own stress toll on your psyche.
Dr. Amrit, I wanted to bring him in because we have a unique opportunity today. Dr. Bhide and Dr. Suresh in Bangalore, Dr. Kersi in Mumbai, and Dr. Amrit in Bhubaneswar. What is your experience, Dr. Amrit, with dealing with bisexual individuals?
Like Bhubaneswar, is not a very, very modern city. People, there maybe even if any patient comes anywhere, all the psychiatrists are afraid to touch. Like, I have, I'm accustomed to working with all of you. So if I have a problem, I call you up. So also I get a lot of calls from my psychiatrist friends. Whenever they get something where they're not able to get in, they just give me a call. Amrit boss, this is for you. It's the young people who generally refer to me. So somewhere, I'm maybe because I'm open to all these things. So when one person gets the solace and the support from me, they go into the community, and then the good word spreads around. So I have a lot of people who come to me. Maybe the bias is because I'm much more friendly. I'm absolutely, like when I ask a question, I generally tell, you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. You have a boyfriend. When a girl comes, she tells no. You have a girlfriend? Tell yes. I get that answer so spontaneously. And then the people talk about their experimenting, they being bisexual, predominantly this, minority this. It's not that, many times people tell that you don't try to learn from your patients. But then once I make them comfortable, once they understand that I'm in the same page with them, they also teach me a lot of things. It is not that just I get the knowledge from what I read. I should not use them. But then once they become very, very friendly with me, they also help me, knowing certain things, the basic concept, because I'm also not, I'm not some Superman that I know everything. So I learn from my patients, and when I have problems, I call up Suresh sometimes, maybe Dr. Kurtzi, maybe you. He knows that I call him up if there is any legal tangle, any problem. I just give a call, and maybe that is why, the whole angle of how I look to them, how I accept them, and when the parents also come, they look at my face to understand how I am receiving this. The therapist face is very important. So when I get a news like this, I'm very, very cool. It is as if somebody is asking me to have a glass of water. So they think, yes, maybe this is normal. And then among the two guardians, somebody is more receptive, somebody is less receptive. Work on the more receptive person. work around the less receptive person. And maybe that is how, when I work in a small place like this, where people, the moment you talk about sex, they feel as if somebody has raped somebody. You just ask sex, it's like you are doing something blasphemous or something like this. So I have to be very, very sensitive, and it's difficult, but yes, we have made much headway than what maybe we were 3 to 4 years back.
Indeed. About bisexuality, I want to just bring out one nuance about bisexuality in India, is the prevalence of patriarchy in India. Now, while Dr. Bhide says that one particular lady, he knows she has accepted her husband's sexuality and promiscuous behavior, it may not be because she really wants to accept. It may be because she doesn't have a choice. She doesn't have a choice. And that is true. I mean, I personally know many bisexual individuals or married gay men whose wives are completely aware of what is happening, but are taking an approach of don't ask, don't tell. Not because they are cool with it, but because they don't have a choice. So it's a very sad situation. One of the I did a small survey of married gay men, and one of the individual actually told me, when I asked him, "Do you feel guilty?" He said, "Prasad, I don't feel guilty. It is an ocean of guilt. I live in that ocean of guilt every single moment of my life." We are coming close to closing time. We take just two questions now. There's one question to Dr. Bhide. As a psychologist, do I encourage a client saying that he or she is compulsively comes out to people almost dramatically who might be discriminating against their homosexuality at workplace? So basically, how do you deal with coming out at workplace?
You'll have to assess the situation over there and the likely reception it is going to have. It's not the wisest thing to come out just to come out. And if the person wants to come out, certainly be with him and give him adequate guidance about how to come out, how to face it. That's why there was a slide which about how people are likely to react. That largely was family oriented, but there are attitudes that bosses and colleagues and juniors might reflect, and you have to be cognizant of those, make allowance for their consternation, and then help them to help you cope with the getting on with the stream of life. And I think that calls for quite a bit of skill on the part of a psychologist or counselor. Certainly, if the person is keen to come out, encourage him to do that. If something goes wrong, be available to him, because that is the time at which many people engage in what Kershi was referring to, suicidal behavior. The coming out we said it's an intense phase where if it's negatively intense, then the mood completely sinks, self-worth completely sinks, anger rises up, frustration rises up, and that's when everything seems black and you want to end your life. Be available and say that don't take recourse to that measure. Suresh wanted to say something.
Most of the time, more than coming out, it's usually they don't come out. When they come out, invariably it will be the romantic relationship. They propose somebody that's the same gender, and then you have to now deal two things. One is coming out, and the other one is failure of a romantic relationship, because it's not a romantic, because they're friends initially, and the other person gets attracted to him or her, and then they propose, telling that I'm a gay or I'm a lesbian, I love you, something like that. And then this time is very crucial, what Dr. Ajit Bide said. It's not just coming out, it's a broken relationship will be there, baggage. So that's the commonest cases which I have seen here in Bangalore. That means you will be having two baggages which you have to deal. That's basically, you have to be available.
Yeah. So
and
I
second
think
part to that question, even if it does not help in the long run or becomes counterproductive, then that's when you don't come out.
Yeah, and coming out needs to be strategically planned. I completely agree with you, Dr. Bhide, that you can't do it. I remember my coming out at my current workplace. It was quite dramatic and quite awesome, but that's another story.
Someday you must tell us. No, because it's an important paradigm to go by,
Yeah.
I'm dealing with, since you brought up the bisexuality, but I'm dealing with a doctor, a physician, who seems to be in a very happy marital relationship. Everybody comments on what an ideal, handsome couple they are. At night, he gets on the net and he has homosexual chats, and that's his the homosexual side of him in the bisexuality. And he tells, after I made a presentation about gay and bisexuals to a medical community, he came up with this and he says, "Doc, I've been living like this." I said, if you're comfortable with it, go ahead. he, unlike your patient, is not in a notion of guilt at all.
One of the important thing about coming out at work is the attitude of your manager, and it's the most crucial part, because the fear that you may have while coming out at work is that, will I get punished for this? Will I, then not be offered promotions, or will I lose my job? So judging the attitude of your manager is very important. So for example, in my case, the reason why I came out is because I knew my manager, my colleague, Dr. Hari Bhakti, who was very supportive, and that is how I was very comfortable coming out. So that's quite crucial. So we come to the end of this wonderful series of two webinars on sensitizing healthcare professionals for the healthcare needs of the LGBT community. And I want to specifically thank you, Practo, Dr. Kersi, Dr. Bhide, Dr. Amrit Patajoshi, Dr. Suresh Baramat, Dr. Avinash D'Souza, and many others who helped to not just plan this series but execute also. So thank you very much, and thank you very much for hundreds of people who have watched it and shared it. So it's been, the response has been quite amazing, and we are really thrilled about it. I just want to end by saying that we have had very rich discussions today and last week. But if you want to remember just one thing from this webinar series, I would suggest just remember one thing, that every person who walks into your clinic may not be cisgender and may not be heterosexual. If we achieve that, that's a good starting point. So thank you very much for being there with us, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday and have a lovely week going forward. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Prasad.
Bye-bye.
Thanks very much.
Pleasure.
Bye, everybody, and thank you, Practo.
Thank you.